Emma Hart had almost forgotten about the college reunion until the reminder popped up on her phone that Friday evening. She stared at the message, thinking she'd just delete it. But something stopped her. Maybe curiosity. Maybe nostalgia. It had been years since she'd seen those faces, that campus, that part of her life. She sighed, got ready, and decided to go. Maybe it would be good to remember. The community hall by the lake looked just like it used to, warm lights glowing through tall windows, music playing softly, people laughing, old classmates catching up as if time hadn't touched them. Emma stepped inside, feeling a strange mix of comfort and distance. Everyone seemed to have changed, yet the energy was the same. She moved through small groups, exchanging smiles and polite greetings. But her heart wasn't fully there. She felt like a visitor in her own past. Then she saw him. Ryan Cooper, the one she thought she'd moved on from years ago. He was standing near the window, talking with an old friend, the soft light catching his familiar smile. Her heart skipped just for a second. He looked older, more confident, but his eyes, those calm, thoughtful eyes, were exactly the same. He noticed her almost instantly. The conversation around him faded as he took a step forward, that same easy smile appearing on his face. "Emma Hart," he said, his voice steady but warm. "You look exactly the same." She let out a soft laugh, half nervous, half surprised. "You've always been terrible at lying, Ryan." He laughed too, and the years between them disappeared just like that. There was no awkwardness, no need for polite catching up. It felt natural, like two people slipping back into a rhythm they once knew by heart. They talked for a while, surrounded by old classmates who drifted in and out of conversations. Ryan told her about his work, a marketing consultant in Seattle now, traveling often, always on the move. Emma shared a little about her own life, her writing, her divorce 2 years ago, the quiet apartment she now called home. Neither went too deep. Both seemed to understand that some stories didn't need full telling yet. Still, there was something in Ryan's eyes whenever he looked at her. A flicker of curiosity, maybe even longing. And Emma noticed no wedding ring. That simple detail made her pulse quicken, though she tried not to think about it. The evening moved on quickly. Music played. People danced. Laughter filled the air. Emma caught herself watching him from across the room more than once. He was surrounded by a few friends. But occasionally, his eyes would find hers again. And that brief connection said everything words didn't. When most of the guests began leaving, the crowd thinning to only a few small groups, Ryan approached her once more. His tone was casual, but his eyes were soft. "Do you want to take a walk by the lake? For old time's sake?" Emma hesitated. It was late. The air outside looked cold through the glass doors. But something deep inside whispered yes. She gave a small nod, her voice barely above a breath. "All right." They stepped outside together. The music faded behind them as the cool night air brushed against their skin. The path around the lake was lit by small lamps, their reflections dancing on the still water. They walked side by side, their steps falling in quiet rhythm. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Emma said, breaking the silence. "Being back here after all these years?" Ryan nodded, his hands in his pockets. "Yeah. Feels like time stood still, and yet everything's changed." She smiled faintly. "We've changed too." He glanced at her, his voice quieter now. "Maybe not as much as you think." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. There was a comfort in the silence that followed, the kind that came only with people who once shared something unspoken. They reached the small wooden bench overlooking the lake, the same one they used to sit on between classes, eating sandwiches, talking about dreams, pretending they had all the time in the world. Seeing it again brought a rush of memories, soft and bittersweet. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The old days?" "Every now and then," he said. "But mostly, I miss how simple everything felt." Emma nodded. "Back then, we thought the world was waiting for us. Now it feels like we're still catching up to it." Ryan smiled gently. "You always had a way with words." She looked at him, and for a brief moment, the past and present seemed to blur. She could still see the young version of him sitting on that same bench, reading poetry aloud just to make her laugh. There was a pause, one of those rare, delicate pauses that holds more emotion than any words could. Emma felt something stir in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. But she quickly looked away, reminding herself of all that had changed. Still, when he spoke again, his voice carried a tone she recognized too well. "You know, Emma, I always thought I'd see you again someday." Her lips curved slightly. "And now you have." He nodded. "Yeah, but it feels different now. Like, we're not done yet." She didn't know what to say to that. Maybe he was right. Maybe this night wasn't about looking back, but about something quietly beginning again. The lights from the hall reflected softly on the water as they walked a little further. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of the breeze and the lake's slow rhythm. And in that moment, under the silver glow of the night, walking beside the man she once almost loved, Emma realized she wasn't just remembering the past. She was stepping into something new, something that felt like it had been waiting for years. They didn't say much after that. Words weren't needed. They just kept walking. Two people who had once lost each other, now finding their way back, slowly, quietly, one step at a time. The air outside was crisp and calm, filled with the scent of wet grass and the faint sound of waves brushing the lakeshore. Emma and Ryan walked slowly along the path that curved beside the water. The night was quiet now. Most of the laughter from the reunion had faded away, leaving only the hum of the wind and the glow of distant streetlights. It felt like the world had paused for them. For a while, neither spoke. It wasn't awkward silence. It was comfortable, the kind that let their thoughts wander freely. Emma glanced at Ryan, noticing how peaceful he looked. He used to fidget, talk fast, always full of restless energy. Now he seemed more grounded, more sure of himself. Time had softened the edges she remembered. She broke the silence first. "You disappeared after graduation. One day you were there, and then gone." Her voice wasn't accusing, just curious, like someone opening an old box of memories. Ryan let out a short breath, a mix of a sigh and a laugh. "Yeah, I know. I got a job offer in Seattle. It was supposed to be temporary, a few months at most. But I kept getting promoted, new projects, new cities. I thought I'd come back once I figured life out. But I guess life figured me out first." Emma nodded slowly, looking down at the gravel under her shoes. "You always had big plans. I used to think you'd end up somewhere far, doing something important." He smiled faintly. "And you thought I'd forget everyone from college, right?" "I didn't think that," she said softly. "I just stopped expecting to see you again." They reached the old wooden bench near the lake, the same one they used to sit on after class. Emma brushed off the light dust from the seat before sitting down, her coat wrapped around her. Ryan sat beside her, leaving just enough space between them to feel polite, but close enough for her to sense the warmth of his presence. The reflection of string lights shimmered over the lake. It reminded Emma of the nights they'd spent there years ago, reading poems, talking about the future, sometimes sitting in silence, knowing words weren't needed. She looked at him again and felt that strange familiarity tug at her heart. The feeling of being understood without having to explain herself. "So, he said quietly. You married Mark, right? She nodded, her eyes still on the water. Yeah. We were together for almost 8 years. It was good at first, but we wanted different things. He liked the city, the rush, the noise. I wanted something quieter. We drifted apart. Ryan didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't ask for details. He just listened, really listened, like someone who respected her story. After a moment, she asked, What about you? Anyone special? He shook his head. I came close once, but it didn't last. I was always traveling. Hard to build something when you're never in one place long enough. Their eyes met briefly, and for a moment, they both seemed to think the same thing. How different life could have been if they'd stayed in touch. If timing had been kinder. The wind picked up, rustling the trees around them. Emma tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her gaze drifting back to the water. Do you ever think about college? She asked. All the time, Ryan said. It was simple back then. We thought we could do anything. I still remember you dragging me to that open mic night. You read your poem about the sky. Everyone clapped and you looked so embarrassed. She laughed softly. I can't believe you remember that. I remember everything, he said quietly. Something about the way he said it made her heart tighten. It wasn't about the poem or the past. It was about her. The silence between them grew deeper, more meaningful. The soft ripples of the lake reflected their faces in broken lines, like a painting fading in water. Emma felt something stir, a feeling she hadn't let herself feel in years. But she didn't want to name it, not yet. Ryan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes on the horizon. You know, I used to think about what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I hadn't taken that job. Maybe things would have been different. Emma's voice was calm but full of emotion. Maybe. But maybe we weren't ready back then. We were young. We wanted too much too fast. He nodded slowly. And now? She turned to face him. Now. I'm not sure what I want. I just know I don't want to keep running from the past. The air around them seemed to grow still. For a moment, neither looked away. It wasn't a stare full of tension, but recognition. The kind that happens when two people finally admit to themselves that something between them never really ended. The moonlight touched the edge of the water, casting silver across the lake. It made everything look softer, quieter, like a dream. Emma felt time slowing down again. She wasn't thinking about her ex-husband, or her job, or the years in between. Just this moment, sitting beside the one person who had once made her believe in possibilities. Ryan spoke again, his tone low and thoughtful. Sometimes I think we don't meet people by accident. Maybe life just puts them back in our path when we're ready. She smiled faintly. You sound like one of those inspirational quotes. He laughed. Maybe, but I mean it. She didn't answer, but her heart did. She could feel the truth in his words, quiet and certain. They stayed like that for a while. Two people sharing silence, memories, and something new taking shape between them. The night was slowly turning colder, but neither moved. The lake shimmered like glass, holding the reflection of two people who had once lost each other, now sitting side by side, wondering if fate was giving them a second chance. And as the last lights from the hall faded in the distance, Emma realized that sometimes the quietest nights said the most, and sometimes the people we meet again are the ones we were never meant to forget. Time slipped by without them noticing. The laughter and music from the reunion had long faded, and the lights inside the hall were now dim. The only sounds left were the soft rustle of trees and the quiet waves touching the lake's edge. Emma looked around and realized how empty everything had become. The cars were gone. The people had left. It was just the two of them now. She smiled faintly. Everyone's gone, she said softly, almost surprised. Ryan looked up at the dark windows of the hall and chuckled. Looks like we stayed longer than anyone else. The wind carried the scent of pine and water. The world felt peaceful, almost too quiet. They were sitting close now, not out of choice, but because the air had grown colder. Their shoulders brushed lightly every time one of them moved, and neither pulled away. I can't remember the last time I stayed out this late, Emma said, glancing at the moon's reflection on the water. Me neither, Ryan replied. But it feels right somehow. There was something in his tone that made her heart beat a little faster. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Soft, sincere, like he wasn't just talking about the evening, but about them. They fell quiet again, watching the lake shimmer under the silver light. It was the kind of silence that didn't need filling. It carried its own meaning. Emma wrapped her hands around her arms to stay warm, and Ryan instinctively took off his jacket, placing it gently around her shoulders. She didn't protest. Still the gentleman, she said, smiling. Still can't let you freeze, he answered lightly. But beneath his easy tone was something heavier, a sense of care that hadn't faded through time. A few minutes passed before Ryan spoke again, his voice softer now. You know, I used to imagine this, seeing you again, talking like this. I just didn't think it would actually happen. Emma turned to look at him. Why not? He shrugged. Because real life rarely gives you a second chance. You move on, you grow up, and before you know it, everything that once mattered becomes a memory. He paused, then looked straight at her. But some memories, they never really go away. Her breath caught slightly. She knew exactly what he meant. She tried to keep her tone steady. You mean us? Ryan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I mean us. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. It wasn't a dramatic confession, just truth. Quiet, real, and raw. I cared about you more than I ever admitted, he continued. Back then, I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving. I told myself I needed to build my life first, become someone before I could be with someone. But I think I just ran away from something I wasn't ready to feel. Emma didn't look at him right away. Her eyes stayed on the lake, but her heart was racing. She'd imagined hearing those words once, years ago, but never like this. Not after everything that had changed. Ryan, she whispered, not sure what to say next. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. She stayed quiet, trying to calm the storm inside her. The years apart had been full of responsibilities, heartbreak, and quiet loneliness. Hearing him now brought everything back. The warmth, the connection, and the ache she buried long ago. Finally, she spoke. It wasn't your fault. Life just happened. We were young, and everything felt bigger than us. I thought about you two, you know. He looked up quickly, surprised. You did? She nodded, smiling sadly. Every time it rained, or when I passed by the old bookstore near campus. You were everywhere in small ways. But I convinced myself it was just nostalgia. Ryan's expression softened. Maybe it wasn't nostalgia. Maybe it was a sign. Emma gave a short, quiet laugh. You sound like fate's biggest fan. Maybe I am, he said, smiling faintly. Or maybe I'm just trying to believe that some things come back for a reason. The night grew colder, but neither of them noticed much anymore. Their words had opened something they didn't realize still existed. An invisible thread that had never broken, only stretched across time. Ryan turned toward her, his voice low and steady. You know, I never stopped wondering what it would have been like if I'd stayed. If I'd chosen you instead of my career. Emma finally looked at him, meeting his gaze. Maybe we needed the distance to understand what we really wanted. He nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. But sitting here now, I can't help but think we lost something we were meant to keep. For a long moment, neither moved. The lake reflected their faces, quiet, thoughtful, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. Emma's fingers brushed against his hand lightly. It wasn't planned. It just happened. The simple touch carried more emotion than words could. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. In that stillness, the world felt smaller. Just the two of them, sitting side by side, caught between past and present. The air was cool, the night endless, and the feeling between them warm and alive. After a while, Emma whispered, "It's strange, isn't it? How after all these years, this feels familiar." Ryan smiled faintly. "It's because it never really ended." She didn't argue. Deep down, she knew he was right. Some stories never ended. They just paused until the right moment came. A soft breeze moved across the lake, carrying the faint sound of the trees. The world around them had gone completely still. No lights, no voices, only them. Ryan looked at her once more and said quietly, "We were there until late, when there was no one around. Maybe that's how it was supposed to be. Just us, no noise, no time, no one watching." Emma's eyes softened, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe this is where we were always meant to end up." And as the moonlight washed over them, they stayed there. Not speaking, not planning, just being. Two people who had once lost each other, finally finding peace in the silence that had waited years to return. The night was fading fast. The stars had started to dim, and the horizon carried a faint line of gold. The promise of morning. The world around the lake was quiet, so still that even the sound of their breathing felt loud. Emma and Ryan stood side by side, facing the water that now shimmered with early light. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was nothing left to say, and yet everything still hung between them. The things they felt, the things they never said, and the things they both knew were true. Emma looked at the reflection of the sky in the lake and said softly, "It's almost morning." Her voice sounded calm, but her heart wasn't. Ryan nodded. "Yeah, guess we've been here longer than we thought." The night had gone by too fast, like time itself didn't want them to notice. Every hour had passed quietly, without rush. And now it was almost over. They both felt it, the moment slipping away, fragile and precious. He turned toward her, his expression serious but gentle. "Emma, do you ever think we met again for a reason?" She hesitated. "Sometimes I think about that. Maybe it's fate. Or maybe it's just coincidence." "Maybe," he said quietly, "but it doesn't feel like coincidence." His words hung in the air, soft but heavy. Emma didn't answer right away. Her thoughts were tangled, full of memories, regrets, and small hopes she didn't know she still had. She looked at him, and in his eyes, she saw everything she had once felt for him: care, warmth, and a sadness that came from knowing how much time they'd lost. "Ryan," she said gently, "we can't change what happened." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. But maybe we don't have to. Maybe we just start from here." The suggestion made her heart ache. It sounded beautiful, starting over, rewriting everything. But real life wasn't a movie. She had her world, he had his. And yet, something inside her didn't want to walk away. She smiled sadly. "It's not that simple." He took a step closer, his voice soft but steady. "Then make it simple. Just be honest with me. Do you still think about us?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She didn't want to lie. She couldn't. Finally, she said, "Yes, I do." That thinking and living are two different things. He looked at her for a long moment, eyes filled with quiet understanding. I get it, he said softly. You're scared of breaking what's already fragile. Maybe, she admitted. Or maybe I just don't want to lose you twice. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and Ryan's expression softened completely. He didn't move closer, didn't try to hold her. He just stood there, respecting the distance, but his eyes said everything his hands didn't. The first light of dawn began to touch the trees, turning the water gold. Emma looked at it and whispered, "It's beautiful." "Yeah," he said. "But it feels like it's saying goodbye." She gave a faint smile. Goodbyes aren't always sad. Sometimes they're just necessary. Ryan looked down for a moment, his hands in his pockets. Maybe, that doesn't make them easier. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight in her chest. You're right. But I think maybe we were meant to find each other again, not to start over, but to remember how much we mattered, to close the chapter the right way. He looked at her, really looked, and said softly, "No, some stories don't close. They just stay inside you." The wind brushed gently through her hair, and for a heartbeat, the world stood still. There was no noise, no time, just the two of them, standing in the quiet light of morning, holding on to a moment they both knew they couldn't keep. Emma stepped closer, her voice almost a whisper. "Thank you for coming tonight, for saying the things I needed to hear." Ryan's eyes softened. "And thank you for listening." She smiled, though her eyes glistened. "I'll remember this night for the rest of my life." "So will I," he said. They stood close now, their faces inches apart, caught between past and present. It wasn't a moment of confession or promises. It was understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. Her hand brushed his, a small, quiet touch, enough to say everything they couldn't put into sentences. Then she pulled back, slowly, like someone who knew it was time to go but didn't want to. "Good night, Ryan," she said, her voice soft and trembling. He smiled faintly. "Good night, Emma." The word hung in the air, tender and final. She turned and started walking toward the parking lot, her steps slow but certain. The sun was rising now, painting everything in pale gold. Ryan watched her go, his heart full, not of regret, but of peace. When she reached her car, she turned once more. Their eyes met from a distance, one last look that said all that was left unsaid. "Thank you. I miss you. I'll be okay." Then she got in, started the engine, and drove away. Ryan stood by the lake a while longer, watching the water shimmer under the new light. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and let the morning wind carry the quiet ache away. They had been there until late, when there was no one around, two souls who had once been part of each other's story, finding peace in the silence of what could have been. And though the world would soon wake up, that night would stay theirs, untouched, unspoken, and eternal.